You are a serious football fan like myself.
Yeah,
I've been fed up with this ritual for some time. It's okay to. It was all right, I suppose, at first, although there was something quite strange about British footballers taking the knee in support of a bloke in Minneapolis, who was shot, who was killed by the police. I don't think most of these footballers could uh, point to Minneapolis on the map, if you see what I mean. But that's a different matter. But do you think it's time that we stopped having to endure watching these players take the knee?
absolutely, I do. And it was very interesting when you played that clip that we've all heard, everyone who's been watching the football over the last few months, the reverential, almost religious way in which it's announced by the Sky TV and the BT Sport commentators now. And it reminds me almost of school assemblies where everybody files in as a kid and you've got to sing Onward Christian Soldiers. But is everybody in that assembly room actually buying into the fact? Are they all good Christians? Of course not. And I would ask the question, how many knuckle-dragging racists have actually changed their opinion due to footballers kneeling down? In many ways, to me, I just see it, you're going through a performance almost for people who are already singing from the same hymn sheet. We're all behind the fact that Black people should be treated equally, that there should not be racism. So I'm not actually convinced it's actually converted anyone, it's had any effect. And if anything, I would suspect it's had the opposite impact. It's wound people up, not just white people who've never been racist in their life and are wondering, why am I now expected to take a submissive position on one knee? But also, as we're hearing today, Black players as well, they know that it is gesture politics almost. And they also know that the people going through this performance may or may not necessarily believe it. So the sooner it stops, the better.
Because it hasn't achieved anything, and that's what Ivan Toney of Brentford was saying, a player of colour. He says, we took the knee, we were told that football was going to sort racism out, and now we've got racist trolling of players going at a higher rate than ever before. It's reached record levels. Apparently, racist taunts on the field of play continue. That's what footballers do to each other. They tend to say things to wind them up, to put them off their game. Apparently this continues. So taking the knee has done nothing to sort out the racism problem in football. And Ivan Toney says that we, the players, are being used as puppets to cover up for the white authorities. Don't forget, everyone who runs football are white middle-aged men, to cover up for the fact they're not actually doing anything about racism. They're just telling the players to be puppets and do this kneeling down ceremony. And Wilfred Zaha, one of our greatest players, by the way, a fantastic footballer, he says being made to do this is degrading to black players. So there is a head of steam building up among the players, particularly black players, that this nonsense has to stop.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also, we have to bear in mind that racism is an absolutely dreadful thing. But I think we do have to be honest as well. And a bit like the COVID-19 situation, I don't think we're ever going to get into a situation where it is completely eradicated. You can push racism down to a certain level, but if the FA and UEFA are actually shooting for a complete abolition of racism, that's not going to happen. I think black people, we're two white people discussing this. Obviously, you had John Barnes making a good case earlier on today on the subject. But I can look, the closest I get from my perspective is, obviously I'm transgender and there's a lot of opposition to trans people out there. I don't think, I'm a realist, we'll never get to a day when everybody is on side with trans people. It's just not going to happen. You can sort of educate people, and so that comes down and demonstrate that you're normal, you're not a threat, etc. And it comes down, but it's never going to vanish completely. And I think it's also, getting back to the football side, to make the big distinction on the phrase Black Lives Matters. Those three words are now two separate things to people. It has baggage, it has connotations. Everybody supports Black Lives Matters, the sentiment, but do you support Black Lives Matter, the movement?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
probably not.
No, exactly. And I do think it's fascinating and probably significant that the resistance now is coming from top black players who feel that they've been used as puppets. Instead of just sending the players out to make this empty gesture and being all religious about it and saying, look how unracist we're being, shouldn't the all white middle-aged men who run football be sorting out the horrific imbalance in the situation where we have, I think there's one manager of colour in the entire football league. One. Now look at the average top team. Look at the average team in the Premiership or the Championship. They are full of players of colour. And why are none of these people becoming managers? Why is it only seen that white people should be the managers, should be the kind of bosses in this game? That's the sort of thing they ought to be getting to grips with, not sending people out to irritate the fans with this stupid gesture, which is all about George Floyd, a guy who died in Minneapolis a long time ago. And as I say, most of these footballers wouldn't be able to point to Minneapolis on the map. Yeah,
absolutely right again, Kev. And interestingly, I don't think you know this about me, Kev. I was actually chair of an FA Equalities panel.
Oh, there you go.
About 2 years ago.
I know you've got a background in the game. I know that.
Yeah, in the north of England. And one of the things that we were looking at the time was why black and BAME people didn't come into football at the level of manager upwards. There's been a lot of work in this area and a lot of investigation. Some people have said that it's just because of the history, because they feel it's not a place where they would feel welcome, that they don't go into that area. And other studies have shown that they're simply, for whatever reason, there hasn't been the interest expressed sufficiently.
I'm not buying that, though. Are you, India? I just don't buy it.
Well, I'm not. Certainly not now. Perhaps maybe 3 or 4 years or so ago, but certainly not now when you have the likes of Sol Campbell, Paul Ince has had a go, etc. There are black former players out there who absolutely want to manage football clubs, and they're not getting the chance. So that is a more productive area for me that the FA, UEFA, all the world governing bodies involved with football should be looking at, rather than gesture politics and doing the pantomime on the pitch.
And the other area is, of course, fan trolling. There's been a lot of terrible racist abuse. The record levels in the last couple of months, particularly against Man United players, but all players have been suffering this recently. So the authorities, the FA's response to this is a rather kind of weak, supine, we wish that we could find out who was doing this trolling, but the social media platforms don't seem to be able to give us the identities of people. So they're right that there is a problem insofar as Facebook and Twitter do sort of tacitly allow this kind of awful racist trolling, and you don't have to identify yourself on these platforms. But I do think perhaps the football authorities could be a lot more proactive about, maybe taking the big clubs off social media. If you don't do anything about it, we're going to do something about it. Maybe monitoring exactly what's going on social media. Not just trying to blame other people, not just trying to point the finger at Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all the other platforms. I just think that the white middle-aged men who run football have got to get to grips with this. This is now a crisis, and it is not going to be solved by this empty ritual of players taking the knee. And when you've got people of the stature of Wilfried Zaha saying, I'm degraded by this, I will not do it anymore, I think we've reached critical mass here. This is going to stop, isn't it?
It is indeed. I think what you've just said there, Kev, is a really good point. It's shameful, as far as I'm concerned, that the likes of Facebook and Twitter have effectively washed their hands of all responsibility, despite the fact that they are actually enablers. They are giving these people a platform and saying, whoa, folks, nothing to do with us. I think it's now incumbent, if they're not going to do something about it, then I think that we as individuals, as Twitter and Facebook users, and that includes the clubs who have the official accounts as well, I think you start to cut off the trolls. You start to say, I'm only going to engage with people with a real photo or a real name up. And I know there'll be people listening to this conversation now who will say, oh, but, for whatever reason, I don't like to give my name. Look, I'm sorry, but trolling has got to such a stage, particularly in reality TV and that sort of world, the entertainment world, people actually get killed by anonymous accounts. And that's not an exaggeration. That is what happens. And I think it's incumbent on all of us, and that should actually be the big cause, that we stop engaging with anonymous accounts.
Yeah, and the clubs might like to think about withdrawing their services from social media. They've got to start doing something, because racism is at a high pitch at the moment in football. And as we've found out over a year of taking the knee isn't doing anything to solve the problem. So we're calling on the football authorities to do something concrete about it.
Yeah, it's just making it more divisive as far as I see. Do you agree? Yeah.
Absolutely, India, thank you so much for the time. Let's talk again soon. India Willoughby, their broadcast journalist and a long-time football expert, was involved very strongly with the game up in the north before she headed down to London.